Hello, hello. Welcome back for those that have done other lessons in this course. Hi, if you are new, my name is Kristen. I'm part of the ADVizE project team. I'm so excited to be here with you. ADVizE is a data visualization experience for pre-service teachers. And we're going to be thinking about how can we help build comfort exploring data. In some ways, this might seem super easy, right? We are naturally curious when we little kids. I mean, how many have talked to toddlers of why, right? I mean, we are curious beings. So in some ways, we're like naturally curious and we like exploring things. But what we find with our pre-service teachers and what we've heard from our faculty across the country as they've been implementing over the last few years of this project is like, something happens when we get our data into data tables or things like that. And it's like, we sort of shut down and we kind of lose that comfort or confidence on how to dive in and explore. Why explore? Well, remember that's core to what we were doing here in the ADVizE project, where we recognize there are lots of different components of working with and making sense of data. But what we found over and over again is that our pre-service students, and so therefore what we were trying to test and research and what we've seen across the country is that others were struggling with, others were seeing what we were seeing in our classrooms is that our pre-service teachers really lack a strong foundation in exploratory data analysis, or how do we explore our data before we move to explaining what it means, interpreting it, analyzing it, pieces like that. And so we need to help our students be comfortable doing these various things in red when they're exploring data. And we can't just sort of poof, expect it to come out of nowhere, or at least we can't yet. If you know how to do that, please let us know, because that's not how it was landing with our pre-service teachers or the faculty that we were working with. So instead, we designed an activity, or we have this activity of a scaffolded way to structure students into a new data set or a new technology, whichever you want to use, to think about, okay, how can I get a little more comfortable exploring something I don't know? Because that's a big part of working with data. You are not always going to be perfectly an expert on the data that you're working with. This is important for our pre-service teachers to experience because they don't know everything when they go into the classroom, and their students absolutely do not know everything. So having this empathy of how do we create the sort of breadcrumbs or the scaffolds to support somebody new into a different kind of data set. So I'm going to talk through what this structure is. We call it the muckabout. You can find, I'll talk through all the pieces. I'll talk through it from this particular example of a content area, but know that it's the structure, it's the shell that is the important piece, and that it's absolutely adaptable for a different content area. So the first step of this muckabout strategy is to engage in some, okay, let's do some quick writing or quick doodling of what's our prior knowledge about the general topic area. So here, for example, let's say we're going to think about air temperature. We're going to just do a quick write of what are some similarities and differences? How does air temperature change day to day, relate to the weather, different things like this, right? Just quick write, free association, what comes to mind when you're thinking about air temperature, similarities and differences day to day with the weather, all of these different pieces. Okay. And I actually encourage you, if you want, play along. Go through this process yourself and see sort of what impact it has for you as you are doing these steps. So if you want to play along, pause the video so you can do your quick write, so you're not trying to listen to me and doing your word association with air temperature. Okay, so next step is we're going to do a bit of a hands-on activity. So we are going to think about, we've got air temperature as our broad topic, but like we've been talking about so far in the lessons, we can't look at a broad topic with data. We need a testable question. We need something we can actually look at with data that we have. So we can revise from air temperature overall to how does mean daily air temperature vary over time? So we've narrowed down. We're looking at mean daily air temperature, not all the different ways we could look at air temperature. And we're going to be thinking about like, well, how does it change over time? We're getting more specific in our exploration in what we are going to do. So if you're playing along, this is where you want to go into the Canvas lesson and click on the Google Sheet, open it up. It will look like this. And what I want you to do is for 5 minutes, set a timer. You can use your phone or egg timer or whatever you want to use. Set a 5-minute timer and just jump in and play around with these data to get at that question of how does mean daily air temperature vary over time? Got it? Okay, 5 minutes, set your timer, come back. Okay, if you did it, you're back. If not, okay, we're gonna keep moving on. So after 5 minutes, what we do with pre-service teachers or with students, because this can be done in this is done often in K-12 classrooms, how it looks at the different grade levels obviously is dependent upon how old the students are, but the structure is the same. You wanna pull everybody back. So they've had 5 minutes to go off and do individual exploration in the data set or in the new technology, and then you pull them back. And what you want to do is you want to have, put them into small groups or into partner groups and have them share out with one another. What were you plotting where? Literally, what variables were you using to get at this question of how does mean daily air temperature vary over time? What kind of plots were you making? What kind of visualizations were you making? What questions were coming up for you, either about the data, what you were seeing in the data, about the data set, about what components of the data set, if you're using a technology, about how to interface with the technology. This is really broad and open, but you're getting them to talk to each other about these kinds of questions. So they've had 5 minutes to do it by themselves, and then they're coming back together and talking through it. Then you do a bit of a group share out. Like, what were we finding? What kinds of plots were we making or visualizations? What kinds of questions were coming up? Sort of creating an opportunity to kind of crowdsource some of the work that we were doing, some of the aha, some of the learning moments that we had. Now, once we've had some of that discussion and share out and peer-to-peer teaching, now we can jump back in. Now, at this point, you can either go drill down even deeper on the questions that you're wanting the pre-service teachers or they're wanting their future students to do from the data set. So we could say, how does that compare, that being the relationship between mean daily air temperature and time, compare across different time scales? Or you can just stick with your initial question. There's some choice here on how you want to move forward. This is when we're going to dive sort of deeper in if we were to getting at the content of what we want students to take away content-wise from the data. We'd really want to lean in at this moment of like, okay, and what's our driving question? What's our testable question, because we're using data, and the driving question for our content learning objective? You go back into the data set to explore it for either the initial question, the next question, whatever you have. And this can be 5 minutes, it can be 20 minutes. Again, it's depending on what you need. But the intention is some initial individual exploration, partner share outs, group share out, crowdsourcing our ahas, normalizing our troubles, helping each other troubleshoot, and then we go back into exploration. After you've done some exploration, you bring everybody back, you return to the sort of broader picture, broader context. We were talking about air temperature, connecting what they were finding to that broader picture. This is helping connect the dots between what were we seeing, how does it relate to our broader topic, different pieces like that. And then finally, and this one is key, always easy to sort of run out of time, but creating space for the pre-service teachers or their future students to write down their thoughts, to do some pause and reflection of what did you learn and want to be sure you remember. This could be a takeaway about the data, in our example, air temperature. It could be about the moves they did, the exploration, a new way of looking at data they learned from a classmate. What specifically changed your understanding, and what was your explanation before? What is it now, right? Sort of what was adjusting, what has changed, and or what remaining questions do you have? Now, what we've done in this muckabout strategy is we have anchored ourselves in prior knowledge, that everybody has some prior knowledge. It's also really helpful to kind of share out, to remember that there's no right answer of that prior knowledge. We're all pulling something in. We've done some initial exploration. We've come back. That initial exploration is sort of 3 to 5 minutes. You want to find that happy space of we're in productive struggle, but not shut down, overwhelm. Then they come back and they teach each other what they were doing, or they share out with one another, create an opportunity to crowdsource, and then they go back in. Rather than just, here's the data, make sense of the data. We're scaffolding it in, and then we also scaffold out by having the, what did we find? And there's different things different groups could have found in the data set. And then this pause to even step out even further of this final reflection, metacognition type moment. And this scaffolded structure of how to help people explore, we heard great things of this gives me sort of a stepping stone in, and I don't feel like I'm sort of spinning out all on my own and not really certain what to do with it. Really resonated. So if we're trying to create opportunities for our pre-service teachers to build their confidence and their comfort exploring data, we need to give them some strategies and some supports on how to do something they haven't really been asked to do previously. So exploring data helps us better understand what data we have and uncover what kind of stories we may want to tell from the data. But we need to, in essence, create space for our pre-service teachers and then their future students to understand how to do that, to feel supported as they are starting to do that. Using a scaffolded method like the muckabout to work with an unknown data set can build that self-efficacy in exploring, as well as encourage students to embrace productive struggle, not shut down so quickly, not always look to you for the answers, but to dig in and be like, okay, well, I can troubleshoot this, or I can turn to my neighbor and figure out what they're doing or learn from them on what they're doing as a way to support their explorations through. And just like in lots of the activities, just remembering that, right, we know from good pedagogy on anything that we're teaching also applies to data. Reflecting on our experiences helps us integrate new skills and the process of building those skills for future use. So hope you enjoyed the muckabout. It's a fun hands-on activity that we heard great things from the pre-service teachers across the country that they deeply enjoyed. Until the next lesson, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you there. Bye.